where do we learn that sex outside of marriage is a sin? We're told that over and over again, but then we read the Bible and it was all types of people having sex outside of marriage and they were not being condemned. John Gray on sex and shacking. The audacity. Here we go.
Sleeping with someone that you are not married to is sin. Living with someone that you are not married to as a Christian is not only unwise, it's ungodly. I'm in love. I don't care if you're in love. If your love includes sin, then your love is distorted. I know you want to be married. Living with him is not the order. Well, I know we Christians, but even though we're not married, I think we should sleep together. You want to ride the car before you buy the car. No, the devil is a lie. This is not CarMax. You're not going to sit up here and try me out. You're going to do this God's way. Don't expect God's blessing and you're not doing it God's way. And if you with him and he tells you he love you while trying to actively sleep with you and you know, and he knows you're a Christian, then that's not love, that's lust, and that's not love from God, that's a user. And if he'll use you now,
nigga preaching by himself.
You don't get to tell me how to operate in my relationship and how to love my partner and be, whatever, respectable, faithful to my partner when you have been outed several times for your infidelity. And that's not me judging you. It's just saying that you need to be careful judging from the seat that you sit in. Like, we have repeatedly seen you get outed. So and then you gonna tell me that I can't have sex outside of marriage? The man that cheated on his wife with voicemails and FaceTime videos is like gonna tell me
falling for him.
Then you gonna tell me that I can't live with somebody? The man who had his kid in the back seat of his car while he was FaceTiming his mistress. Sir, absolutely not. Hush. My grandmama used to do this right here. Close it.
I mean, he had a wolf on his hoodie, so that was it for me. That's the wolf in sheep clothing right there. His hoodie had a wolf on it.
Oh, God.
I'm not an inanimate object. I'm not a car. I'm not a flower that you pick my petals and now all of a sudden my value is gone. I'm a full human being. And the problem with niggas like him is you're looking at women as if they're inanimate objects.
My.
You're placing my value in my box. And then you wonder why you struggling in your fucking marriage.
But that's how we've been indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And you ain't figured it out yet. And you're spitting this nonsense across the pulpit. And the thing that enrages me is that, like I was at one point in time, there are people sitting in that audience actually looking to him for wisdom.
Yeah.
And thinking that maybe he's making sense because, I've slept around and I've lived with people and it hasn't worked out. So it must be a sin. And there's so much more to why relationships don't work out. Clearly, you're married, but because y'all stay together, it's working.
Selenia is giving this energy.
after all I've been through, you niggas can't take my joy. You niggas won't steal my joy. You niggas won't piss me off. And after all I've been through.
Cause listen, he be trying to steal our joy, don't he?
Every time.
What was you gonna say, babe?
I was just gonna say that I think we're programmed in that way to be inanimate objects, Selenia. When you tell somebody that you belong to another person because y'all got married, you become an object. When you preach to women that you cannot say no to your husband, you become an object. So it's not surprising to me that John Gray talks about women or relationships in a very objectified way, because that's the way we're programmed. We're not programmed to own our bodies. We're not programmed to speak about our bodies, talk about our bodies. We are programmed that we belong to our partner. Belong. That's ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So when you belong to somebody and they own you, all kind of shit that's inhumane might come up because you're not your own.
Yo, and to the point that I love music, to the point that she made, is it a partnership or is it a purchase? Well, that's a great question, because in the Bible days, it was a purchase. So if you try to base your relationship ethic on the culture in which the Bible is set, then yes, it is a purchase and the woman is the property. So there is the unraveling that we must do in our conversations about sex and relationship, because where he starts the conversation with sex outside of marriage is a sin. If you believe that, everything else he says makes sense, which is why I challenge people to question their basic assumptions, because all of us who were raised in the church were raised to believe that sex outside of marriage is a sin. That's the basic paradigm. Of course, that's a sin, right? So then you build everything on top of the basic assumption that sex outside of marriage is a sin. And what we're challenging people to do in this space is to question that basic assumption. Because where do we learn that sex outside of marriage is a sin? We're told that over and over again, but then we read the Bible and it was all types of people having sex outside of marriage and they were not being condemned. You know, so it's like we have to question these basic assumptions, because once you believe that your sexuality is inherently sinful unless you married to somebody of the opposite sex, everything else just kind of falls into place. And then it's easy to keep you in control and keep you in that shame cycle, because you're already convinced at a basic level that your sexuality is inherently sinful. So that's the work that we do here, right? Undoing the basic assumption that your sexuality is sinful.
In the context of the world that we live in, this patriarchal, like, it is still women as property, and we are groomed to be, unfortunately, I'm saying this and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but women who are groomed in church, we are indoctrinated to become fucking pick-me's. You want to be chosen. You want to be owned. You want somebody's man to come and be your kinsman redeemer. You want to be Ruth. You want to be Proverbs 31 women. And at the end of the day, the difficulty is not when you're chosen, but when you're not chosen. Because when you're chosen, you think you special. You think, a man has, given you whatever clout you need to be seen in public circles. And it does go back to women as property, because it's always been the women who are single, the women who are LGBTQ+, the women who are widowed, that are witches, that are uncontrollable, that are ungovernable. So yeah, it's a lot, and it's a lot of indoctrination. And even when I talk to Pam, I be kicking my own back in, but I have to remind myself that this is how I was raised. This is how I was groomed to be a whole ass pick-me that does not love or value myself, because I wasn't taught those things. And to be learning those lessons in my 40s, it's very difficult. And there are times when I just be like, girl, just give up. Just go back to the coon cycle. Like, go be somebody.
The coon cycle.
Baby, you can cook, you can clean, you can do whatever you need to do if you needed to. But I would not be able to be my full authentic self. I would not have joy. I would not have peace. So it's a trade-off. Like, I know a lot of women who are married, a lot of my friends who are still in church in their 40s, 50s, talking about single, saved, and satisfied. Sis, no, you're not. Stop lying. You want to get picked. And when you get picked, all of a sudden, all of these struggles of being single and struggling for so long are going to be worth it, because you got picked because you were groomed to be a pick-me. And we all got to get delivered to that.
what unraveled for me was the idea of order, that specific indoctrination of order. And because I was that pick me, I did all that. I waited till I was in my mid-20s to lose my virginity. I cooked, I cleaned, I was church, like I did all those things, and yet I was still unmarried. And it's like, well, there's this order that you keep saying, and I'm submitting to the order. And then I was seeing other women who were older than I was and were submitting to God and waiting and serving and all these things, and they didn't have a husband. I was like, somebody's lying.
Yeah. I never noticed until I started doing this work with y'all how all of the majority of the conversations, the vast majority of them about sex and relationships are targeted directly at women. Because he was talking to the women. If you notice, when he used pronouns, they were all feminine pronouns. It was always, you need to, you need to, you need to. And if he want to do this, then you need to. It's like, that's interesting. That's interesting. So the women are ultimately responsible for the sexual sin, but they're also not equal to men. Like, they're also supposed to be subordinate to men, but they hold all the power in the sexual situation. He said having sex before marriage is a sin. And then he said shacking is ungodly. So, and back in the day, shacking was a sin. Sex and shacking was both. So is he saying shacking isn't necessarily a sin, but it's ungodly? And if it's ungodly, what does that mean? Like, where does that lead us if it's ungodly, but not necessarily a sin? And I feel like if we were to pose that question to him, it will probably go something like this.
Yeah, the Bible says. What does that mean, Duffy? I mean, it means what it means.
I really feel like it will go like that, right? Because what does that mean? So you're telling me that getting with somebody and living together for whatever reason, because for a lot of people, it's like bill consolidation. Life is expensive. And if we're doing so much of life together anyway, let's go ahead and consolidate these expenses. But even if it wasn't that, even if you just wanted to live with them, what is the problem? And that goes back to the basic assumptions. It goes back to the basic assumptions, because in fundamentalism, sin is defined using shame. So fundamentalism manufactures shame, and it applies that shame to shit that ain't harming nobody. So when we come along and say, no, let's use harm to define sin, you know what happens to fundamentalists? Their brains glitch, because I've had so many of them say, harm? Where you get that from? The gospel ain't about harm. I'll be like, so what's your argument against harm reduction? You know what I'm saying? Like, you so offended that I shifted the paradigm, and not I made something up. I'm going off of Jesus. I'm going off the greatest commandment, and shifted the energy from the shame your church manufactures to actual harm done to human beings. And now you don't know what to do with it, because your church never said anything about harm. And now, because you're being confronted with the reality of the harm that your doctrine and dogma has done to people, instead of sitting with the actual harm, you just revert back and entrench yourself further in manufactured shame. We don't do that manufactured shame around here, though. If you're still here, hit the subscribe button and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the video. And if you want to see the entire recording, it's exclusively available in our Patreon. The link is in the show notes. You can either subscribe or you can just purchase this recording a la carte. We'll see you next time as we continue to deconstruct harmful theology and build beloved community. Peace out.